And one of the folks who was with us out in Sundance was Jeff Berding. Jeff, how are you?
Hi, Betsy. Good to be with you in your class.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It was funny this morning, you know how when you're on Facebook and memories every once in a while pop up. And boy, I had this memory pop up today uh, with you. You were announcing your latest, it was 9 years ago. So you were announcing the latest class of draftees for FC Cincinnati. So, and there you are.
Wow. How about that? How about
So
that?
I know. So, of course, I always think that, Facebook listens to what you're saying, and then all of a sudden, oh, man, I wish I had a pizza tonight. And then all of a sudden, all these pizza ads comes up on
Yes.
Facebook. I think they knew that we were going to talk, and so here comes a photo from FC Cincinnati. But um,
Awesome.
yeah, Jeff, thank you so much for being with us. I was just telling them about our week at Sundance and how important this will be for
It
Cincinnati to
game
land.
changer.
Yeah, it really is a game changer. And thank you so much for being there with us and helping us network with the important people and the board people and everybody out there. We really appreciate it. But what I want to talk about today is really business and sports. And Jeff, as I mentioned to you, there are a lot of students in this class who are in the Mendoza School of Business, who are looking at econ, who are looking at finance, who are looking at majors that have something to do with business. And so, yes, this is a media class. And yes, we will be spending most of our time talking about media and how you can extend your career in sports by going the media route. But I also want to have a few guests in during the semester that can talk about the business side, because I think that it's so important nowadays to have that business background because, all of a sudden, sports is big business, and it's never going to shrink. It's always going to get bigger, and the opportunities will always get bigger. And
Sure.
so, Jeff, first of all, I just want you to start out talking about kind of your route, how you got involved, and kind of your path to where you are now at FC.
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone, and I'll try to make this somewhat interesting. Um, I have a very non-traditional route into sports. We have lots of interns, and I've now been in professional sports. This is my 30th year, and people ask about my pathway, and I just want to acknowledge it's unconventional. I studied political science and Soviet studies at Miami University and thought I was going to be a diplomat. Studied Russian language one summer in summer of 1988 in Moscow, and made two subsequent trips to what was then the Soviet Union. But I was also getting involved in politics to elect people that I thought would make good policy, foreign policy. And as a result of that, when I graduated from Miami, I worked for the Ohio Attorney General, then the Ohio Speaker of the House, and then was the state political director for U.S. Senator John Glenn, the former astronaut who became, I believe, a four-term senator representing Ohio in his last reelection. Afterwards, worked a year in Washington, D.C., came back thinking I was going to go to law school, and ultimately landed in Cincinnati, ran a congressional campaign for our incumbent member of Congress, and prepared to go to law school. And a couple of friends of mine, one of whom is a Notre Dame grad, George Malinsky, George and his wife, they talked me out of going to law school. And instead, I got my MBA started taking my MBA at night at Xavier. I give you all of this because then that's when my career took a very fortuitous turn. The county commissioners put an issue on the ballot to raise the sales tax to fund new stadiums for the Reds and Bengals. The Bengals were talking about relocating to Baltimore, or shortly thereafter, after Cleveland Browns went to Baltimore, the Bengals talked about if they couldn't get a stadium deal, they would go to Cleveland. And they needed a political person in town, and they asked me if I would run the campaign. And my point being, if I was in law school, I would have said, I'm sorry, I'm a 1L. There's just no way I can take time to run a political campaign. But instead, I was taking MBA classes at night. And I said, well, just let me get through this semester. This was in November of 1995. The campaign was at the election day was in the spring, and I won't take classes in the spring. Long story short, I ran the campaign. We got 62% of the vote. And then the Bengals hired me. Mike Brown, the owner, famously said, if you can sell people on raising taxes to build me a stadium, you must be a pretty good sales guy. And I became sort of the non-family senior business executive there at the Bengals and ended up being there almost 20 years. While I was at the Bengals, I was very involved in civic and political affairs, led a coalition of young people, including George Malinsky and another Notre Dame grad, Chip Gerhart, and we changed the form of government in Cincinnati to a stronger mayor system, which people thought was crazy. And in 2005, I was recruited by the business community to run for Cincinnati City Council, which is a part-time job. So I was still a full-time executive and had the blessing of Mike Brown, the owner of the Bengals, to go make Cincinnati better. So I was elected to 3 terms on Cincinnati City Council. And a lot of parents coach their kids' soccer teams. And so I coached 2 of my kids' teams. My son and my younger daughter were good soccer players. And when I came off city council, I was invited to join the board of my kids' youth soccer club, the travel club. And I quickly led a merger with another club, and we became the biggest club in Cincinnati. And I start to meet all the presidents. And anyway, I decided that, my kids love soccer, but there's no hometown team. There's a team up in Columbus, the Columbus Crew. And I grew up on the Cincinnati Reds, the Big Red Machine. And I wanted my kids to have a hometown team to root for because I think it's an anchor to your love of your city when you have the love of sports teams, particularly as a kid. And plus, it makes the city more fun. And I started doing a lot of research to see the opportunity, what the data said. I had access to good data in the NFL. And then I wrote a business plan to create FC Cincinnati. I took it to the Bengals ownership, and they had no interest in soccer. I took it to the Cincinnati Reds ownership. They had no interest. I went up to the University of Cincinnati, started talking to Santa Ono, the president, and Mike Bone, the athletic director. And they were interested. This was all in like November and December of 2014. January, about 10 years ago, Carl Lindner called me and said, I understand you're trying to bring soccer to Cincinnati. His father had owned the Reds, and Carl headed up one of Cincinnati's Fortune 500 companies, Great American Insurance. I said, yes. He says, do you have your owner yet? And I said, well, I don't have a place to play, and no one's going to invest $6 million till I have a place to play. And he said, well, you may not know this, but I'm on the board of trustees at UC. And last night we approved your plan that to host the games at Nippert Stadium. So my question to you is, could I be your partner? And I said, well, you were on the list of people I was going to call once I had the place. And he said, well, let's have lunch. I want to hear more about this plan. And we had lunch and shook hands and agreed to partner. And we launched the team August the 12th of 2015. So we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year. And 3 years in the USL. We started with 6 people around my kitchen table, starting up a 3rd division soccer team, promoted to 2nd division. And after 3 years, including winning a championship, we moved up to Major League Soccer. At that time, probably about 40 people working for us. Built the stadium, survived the pandemic. And after opening the stadium, we rebooted our soccer leadership. And over the last 3 years, we've had more points, higher level of success than any team in Major League Soccer other than LAFC. So, and also winning our first trophy. So you can hear that's a little bit untraditional. I went from politics to a senior executive of the Bengals, and then to the owner and founder of FC Cincinnati. So I acknowledge I didn't really pay my dues, unless you would count my 20 years at the Bengals as somewhat paying my dues, Betsy.
Well, a little bit. And talk about, I mean, it had to be kind of a big decision. You had to lose some sleep. I'm at the Bengals and I got a pretty good job here at the Bengals, and I'm in the NFL and this and that and the other. And then you leave that behind for soccer. And let's face it, the history of professional soccer in Cincinnati is start and stop. There have been so
There have been
many,
many failures, yes.
yeah, on all kinds of levels, indoor, outdoor, USL, and everything. And soccer, even though there always was a core of fans, it never took off until FC came. So the first question I want to ask is, did you really have to consider the jump that you were making from the Bengals to this startup? And second, why do you think that FC Cincinnati succeeded when all these other teams didn't?
Yeah, I'll answer them in that order. So, uh, there, when Carl and I were working on the plan, I mean, this is sort of a fun part of our story. From that January meeting until May, we went up to see Don Garber at Major League Soccer because we wanted to make sure we had a pathway to go from the lower division, which is where we were testing, sort of brand testing the concept, to Major League Soccer. And from the very beginning, my very first meeting, I had said that I wanted sweat equity. I just wanted a little stake because it was my plan, and he was very agreeable to that. But we never talked about it much further. So my point being, I was doing this as a civic exercise, and I just thought it was good for the city. And if I got a little bit of stake that someday maybe help my kids, then great. After the Don Garber meeting, Carl took me to dinner in New York, and he said, "Listen, my family and I, we're all in. We're going to put up, maybe it's going to be over $200 million to get this thing done to Major League Soccer. But first thing before we do it is I have to ask you a question." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Are you all in?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Are you prepared to leave the Bengals and run the team?" He goes, it's your plan. You have the understanding of the local soccer scene, the politics. You've been in sports business for 20 years. This only works as if you're running it. Well, he had never had that conversation with me. I always assumed that one of his people would be running the team. And I just said, "Listen, I have 3 kids about to go through college, and I need a little bit of longevity, if you will, because this thing won't be easy. It's going to take a few years." And we agreed, and shook hands, and I went went back to the hotel and called my wife and said, "Well, I'm leaving the Bengals." And I remember a funny story. I went back to Cincinnati the next day and gave 8 weeks notice to the Brown family who owned the Bengals. And I went down to see Marvin Lewis, who's is a mentor and a friend. And I said, "Marvin, I'm going to leave the Bengals." And he says, "Oh, you're finally going to get out of here. That's great. Where are you going?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to start a soccer team." And he said, "Where?" And I said, "Cincinnati." And he laughed, his little Marvin chuckle, and said, "But Jeff, there's very little immigrant community in Cincinnati. Who's going to go to the games?" And I said, "Marvin, everyone's going to go to the games." And he said, "So you're leaving the Bengals in the NFL to start a Major League Soccer team?" And I said, "Well, to be fair, I'm starting a minor league soccer team." He goes, "You're leaving the NFL to start a minor league soccer team?" And he starts chuckling, and he's like, "Well, God bless you and good luck." Later, the first season, we hosted Crystal Palace in front of 35,000 people at Nippert Stadium. And Marvin's sitting next to me and says, "How did you see this? Like, how did you know you could pull this off?" And so that's sort of the second question, Betsy, is I had a plan, and I felt like the reason that the other minor league soccer attempts had failed was because they lacked 5 key ingredients. And when I wrote my business plan on a legal pad, this is literally what I wrote, started with this. This is how the plan started. Number one, they had never had big time ownership. You needed ownership to invest in the plan and be patient in the plan. Probably going to lose some money, and you need some folks that can weather that. Number two, experienced sports management. Didn't take soccer people. It took sports business people who knew the business of sports, the role of sponsorships and ticket sales and premium seating and account management and social media and broadcast. You get the point. Like, we'd hire the coach who would be a soccer person. The rest of us didn't have to be. We just had to be experienced sports professionals. In Cincinnati previously, it had all been led by soccer people, coaches, players. Number three, we needed a professional venue because we needed some place where people were going to want to come to the games, where there was different seating options and there was a place for supporters to create that vibe, that unique soccer experience. Number four, we needed to play soccer that was pleasing to the eye. My son's team was a state cup champion, and when his team played other really good teams, it really is a beautiful game to watch. But when I was watching my son play, it was free. I didn't have to buy a ticket, so we're charging people. So it had to be a really good soccer. And then the last one was to create a relevant sports brand. None of those minor league teams, Betsy, were relevant in the Cincinnati marketplace. And I thought to be a relevant sports brand, we had to be three things that unfortunately the Reds and Bengals were not doing enough of. One was to be a winning team. Two was to be a family friendly, inclusive club. And three was to be a franchise that gave back and made the community better. And I felt like if we could do those three things right out of the gate, we would be relevant. I was very confident that with Carl Lindner, with the people that I had pulled together around my kitchen table, with the ability to play at Nippert Stadium, the owners were going to invest in good players. That we were the New York Yankees of minor league soccer, so we could go out and just find the best players who were not playing in Major League Soccer, and in some cases maybe they had been on Major League Soccer rosters but never really got a lot of play time. And, we'd pay them more. There was no salary cap. And so we quickly started stockpiling good players. And our first year coach, John Harkes, gave us a lot of credibility. He was a former U.S. Men's star. And so right out of the gate, just to give you a sense, the league attendance was 3,100. The business plan that I had written said we would draw 10,000. Famously, I was talking on the way to a soccer tournament in Wisconsin. I'm talking to Carl Lindner, and I have a soccer spouse, another dad, and our two boys. We would take turns carpooling. He hears me having this conversation with Carl about attendance, and I hang up. He goes, "Dude, you just lied your ass off to Carl Lindner. There's no way in hell you're going to draw 10,000 people a game. You're insane. Never." He goes, "You might draw 100. You might draw maybe 1,000. You'll never draw 10,000. Well, the first game we drew 14,000. The second game, 17,000. The third game, 20,000. We never looked back. By the fourth month, 35,000 against Crystal Palace. So it affirmed my belief that if you had a good plan and good people executing against the plan, you could be successful.
And part of that plan, and full disclosure, we were very fortunate to work with Jeff and his team to help them launch. But part of that plan was really grassroots. I mean, you went to every bar that had any kind of a soccer connection and you rallied those fans. And I think that that's something that no one else did. They really took the time to go out and find that community because I always say soccer, hockey, those sports, I mean, it is a niche sport. And so you
Yes.
have to find those fans, and they're out there, but you have to
Yes.
find those fans and cultivate them. And I think that that's something that you did even before you kicked the first soccer ball, that
We
you
did.
cultivated them.
So I wrote the marketing plan based on Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point. And he talks about influencers like in your close circle and how you become a cultural phenomenon by starting with very small groups who are in a position to influence others. And we started with three distinct groups: the business community, because I felt like the business community was not going to let Carl Lindner fail, and understood that this represented a unique opportunity to make Cincinnati more attractive, a lot more energy to young people who grew up loving soccer and would think this was a net positive. So the business community was number one. Number two was youth soccer parents. I knew the president of every youth club, and when we started selling tickets, you could go online, find your kid's club, do the drop down menu, and 10% of your ticket purchase would go back to the youth club. So when you think about scholarships or helping travel expenses, there was an opportunity. And so every club in Cincinnati, big and small, boys teams, girls teams, all could do that. And that got the soccer community on board. And then the last one, as Betsy said, was we went around to all the bars on weekends where they were watching European soccer, whether it was Premier League or Bundesliga. And Carl Lindner and I, and then once we hired John Harkes, we would buy beer, a round of beer for everyone in there watching, and then talk to them about at halftime of those games or before the games kicked about FC Cincinnati and inviting them to create that unique soccer culture of a supporter section with the drums and the smoke and the chants. And anyone who's a real passionate soccer fan watching European football knows that that's a key part of the experience. We were inviting them to create that. It was very organic. And we knew that that was going to be the siren call for people in our city. So when we were selling all those tickets, we had the smallest ticket sales staff of any team in the league. People couldn't understand how we were selling all these tickets. And my answer was they sell themselves because imagine you got this we call it the Bailey, the supporter section. And the whole game, they're standing and dancing and chanting, and there's smoke when there's goals and the drums. And people, a soccer parent or someone who works for one of the companies would come to a game and then around the water cooler or on the sideline. Have you been to an FC Cincinnati game yet? You got to go. Maybe someone would say, well, I'm not much of a soccer fan. And then the response would be, you don't have to be a soccer fan. It's only 2 hours long. And they got these people at the end that sing and dance and they never sit down and they have drums and smoke. Just go to watch them. And that literally became the siren call where people are like, okay, you got to give it a shot. I'll give it a shot. And they'd go and then they'd go, oh my goodness, you're right. That's amazing. And then they're telling their people the same thing. And it just built and built and built and built until we played Crystal Palace, 35,000. And that's when we tipped because at that point, we had become a cultural phenomenon in Cincinnati 4 months after we launched.
Absolutely. I wanted to open it up for questions. I can't see everybody on the screen at the same time. So if you have a question, just go ahead and jump on in. Don't wait for me to call on you. But I think that looking at that business model is something that is unique. I think it's something that, as you said, you certainly planned out. And it's something that, if you want to write a book, you want to write your next tipping point, that would be like a nice model for others to follow, whether they want to start a soccer club or whatever they want to do.
Well, sure, any startup, if you're irrelevant, you're probably going to struggle to find success.
Yeah, exactly. Any questions real quick from anybody in the class? Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Hi, Jeff. I'm Ben. I'm from Cincinnati.
Hi, Ben. Are you Brian Hicks' son?
I am actually, yes.
I guessed that. That's great. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. You mentioned a little bit about the transition in the MLS and getting more soccer staff on the operations side. Can you talk about the decision to? I remember originally it was like a European head coach, European general manager, and then when you transitioned to Pat Noonan and more of an MLS background, the success started to come. What was the decision making there? Try like an MLS centered approach.
Sure. So when we moved from the USL to MLS, we had 277 days, and we were in the midst of a championship season. And at that time, our coach we went 23 in a row unbeaten. And so, we believed in Carl and I developing champions from within. So we were willing to give Alan a shot to be the major league coach. And with his ascent, some of our best players also were awarded an opportunity to move up with the team. And if you remember, Ben, we had beaten a bunch of MLS teams in the Open Cup, so we probably had some misplaced hubris, to be fair. But in terms of the European approach, it wasn't that we had a European approach, but when we talked, we had a consultant working for us, an experienced consultant, to find the GM. And when we talked to a lot of the assistant GMs or some of the GMs with some of the MLS teams, they all told us, you don't have enough time. You're going to fail. And then call us after you fail when you reboot because the league set you up for failure. We probably didn't realize that at the time, but we weren't given a choice. We weren't given an opportunity to say, can we actually have longer to prepare? It was, you're going to play next year in 277 days. So at the end of the day, we hired a Dutch general manager who was from a smaller club, but who had experienced a lot of success in terms of young players, developing young players. And we decided that we would give this person, his name was Gerard Nijkamp, who's still a friend, we would give Gerard an opportunity. After the first coach, the USL coach, failed, which he did, Gerard then led the hiring effort as the GM. And he hired a Dutch head coach. And then when that coach when he moved on, he hired another Dutch coach. Now, Ben, I want to tell you, Carl and I were never insisting that we hire European coaches or Dutch coaches. We hired a Dutch GM. And one of the things I found out about Dutch footballers is they're very stubborn in their belief in Dutch football. And so, yes, Gerard was trying to replicate that model. For the record, and maybe this will be in my book someday, Betsy, but Carl and I told Gerard we didn't want to hire Jaap Stam to be the head coach. We didn't think there was anything in his background that made us believe he would be successful. He was a world-class player. We thought an MLS coach, and the runner-up to Jaap Stam was an MLS coach, and who had won 2 trophies. But at the end of the day, if your GM is saying, I'm going to hire this coach, and as ownership, you say, no, you're not, then you're at a stalemate. You either fire the GM or you let the GM make his hire. And so what Carl and I told him is, listen, Gerard, if you're going to hire Jaap, his contract aligns with your contract, which was effectively 2 seasons. And if he fails, which unfortunately we believe he will, we hope he succeeds, but if he does fail, you're both out. And that is what happened. Then to follow up, absolutely at that point, I always say you can make mistakes, but the key is to learn from them and not repeat them. So at that point, 100%, we are going to hire MLS veterans who knew what winning looked like, what was required to win in Major League Soccer. So we hired the assist with a consultant, after a process, we hired Chris Albright, who was the assistant GM from Philly, to be the GM. And then he, with my support, hired Pat Noonan, who was the assistant head coach in Philly. And it was key there because they had already built trust. Because trust at a senior level, is particularly among the GM head coach, is very critical. They had that trust, which let us hit the ground running and make the playoffs and the level of success we've had since even in the first year.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other questions? Anna Grace, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Anna Grace. I'm also from Cincinnati. I remember going to
Nice.
games when it was still a USL team back at Nippert. But my question is, I know recently there was the bid from Cincinnati to get an expansion team in the National Women's Soccer League. I know that ended up going to Denver, but I was wondering, especially since Caitlin Clark was in on the bid and a lot of other people were super behind it. Will that bid remain for future expansions of the league? Just kind of where is that going?
Yeah, so we submitted a bid. We're very bullish on women's soccer. We want to bring the first women's professional team to Cincinnati. We were honored to have Caitlin Clark in our ownership group for that bid. At the end of the day, we were told that there was bias against MLS teams. They didn't want MLS teams in the league. We thought that was a failed strategy on their part, but they're certainly within their right to choose someone else. And to be fair to them, they chose a city that bid a hell of a lot more money. But we don't think it's all about the money. They chose a city that has no facilities at all, no training facility, no stadium, no experience, no dedicated fan base. We were offering all of that. And candidly, with the support of some of our biggest companies in town who would support the league. So economically, we thought the owners would come out better with picking us, maybe not in the short term, but in the long term. And I would offer prioritize that short term dollar and didn't pick us. We're still bullish. We still have every intention of bringing women's soccer. We have another strategy that we're pursuing, and at some point that'll be public. And we feel very confident about the opportunity to have a women's team playing here in TQL Stadium.
Got time for one more question. Anybody else have a question they want to throw in? Again, I can't see everybody at once, so if you have a question, jump in. Anybody else?
I'll ask one more.
Okay,
Jeff,
thanks, Tyler.
Tyler, great to
Hi.
talk to you. Appreciate you coming in today. As you think back to earlier on in your career, at least maybe a little bit closer to where we all are at right now, is there a piece of advice or something you learned, maybe something you experienced early on that's really stuck with you and has helped you find success in all of the different ways you've gone about the sports world, the business world, and the world of Cincinnati, I guess, too?
Sure. Let me offer you a quick experience. I had a person on my staff who started as an intern at FC Cincinnati. She was at UD, and she was a game day intern. She came down for all 10 games. I have 10 game day interns when I'm at the Bengals. And she proved herself to be the most reliable. She'd come on Fridays and help stock the suites. She'd get there early on Sunday to make sure there was no last minute needs. When the game was over, she went through the suites and collected all the stuff that we normally did on Monday. Well, my assistant left at the end of the season. Well, who did I hire? I didn't hire one of my game day interns. I hired the best one, the most reliable one. She is now a C-suite chief youth and community officer for FC Cincinnati, and she's worked for me now about 17 years. 1 year she worked for an advertising agency, and as I was launching FC Cincinnati, and I brought her back. So where did her career? She's pretty well paid. I mean, she's C-suite. She started as a game day intern for me, but she proved herself by working hard and being reliable. I never had to. Is Kate going to be here? If we had a no show, Kate could call a friend and get someone to step in. So I always just, your journey. I always say you have a life pathway ahead of you, and the goal would be to find something you're passionate about. Okay, and understanding that you're. I always say stubborn on vision, flexible on journey. In my career that I shared with you, my vision was to make my community better, to serve servant leadership, which I know you talk about at Notre Dame. But I thought I was going to be it as a diplomat, and I did it as a sports, now soccer executive and owner, and trying to run a team the right way. So I've been stubborn on my vision for what my life meant and my values, but I've been pretty flexible on my journey. But I would say along the way, I've had a lot of good mentors. And I've tried to, like what Kate did with me, prove myself to be reliable, to be trustworthy, to work hard. I tell my kids, showing up is half the battle. If you just show up reliably, you're a B student. You're better than 80%, because people just aren't reliable. And so be reliable. Be someone that people can trust. Stand out is someone. When I first started my professional career, literally my first job, I would leave at the end of the day, and my boss would say, well, it's good that you're done with your work. I'll be here for a few more hours, which then taught me before I would leave to say, hey, I'm done. Is there anything I can help with? More often than not, the answer was no, but occasionally the answer was yes. Well, guess what? He then valued me a little bit more because I was trying to make his life a little bit easier so he could go home. Those are some of the values that when I've had good interns, or good people working for us, that they would exhibit those traits. But they're certainly really good when you're starting out. I would just encourage that. And one other thing I would say is be willing to be uncomfortable. Growth comes from being uncomfortable, not comfortable. And so if you're finding opportunities that are a little uncomfortable to you, embrace it, because you'll grow. Even if you fail, you'll still grow, because there's growth in failure.
Thank you, Tyler. And just to expand on that, because I usually, when I do one of these interviews, I always ask, what kind of advice that you give the students. We talk, generally, you were mentioning about making sure that you show up, making sure that you make an impression. But experience-wise, you mentioned that you kind of took a roundabout way to get where you wanted to go, but you had an idea of where you wanted to go. Mm-hmm. It just maybe did not look in the form that you thought it was going to be. But experience-wise, what would you suggest that these students do to get experience, maybe even beyond the internship? Because most everybody, I think, in this class has an internship already lined up for the summer, but maybe beyond the internship, what kind of experience can prepare them for if they go into sports, if they go into business, if they go into a combination? What would you suggest that they do?
A couple things. Number one, I think civic involvement is awesome. So in addition to whatever job you have, be involved in the community in some way, because not only, in my opinion, does it help you feel good about yourself and that you're making a difference in people's lives, but it's also wonderful networking. You're going to meet lots of interesting people, and they'll be impressed by your service. And they may find that attractive to some opportunity that either they have in their company or that they're aware of through their own peer network. That's number one. And I think it also shows that it's not just about you. That as you think about how you want to live your life, it's broader than just you being a climber in some sort of more transactional or traditional way. The other is to keep investing in yourself. There's a famous Ted Lasso about where he's throwing the darts and he says, "Be curious." Be curious. I'll tell everyone here, I'm 57 and I'm learning Spanish on Duolingo. So never stop learning. Invest in your own growth. I'm a big believer that we're either growing or we're dying. I think that's true of cities. I think it's true of businesses. And I think it's true for us as individuals. You have to have a growth mindset and showing your prospective employers that you have a growth mindset, that you're trying to add new talents and new skills. And again, expanding your network through professional opportunities or service opportunities. That is a way to show that you have a growth mindset. I always say with FC Cincinnati, we're a very ambitious club. We're only 10 years old, but we're ambitious. And we have this thing, there's a fixed mindset individual and a growth mindset individual, and there's key characteristics. And I have our HR people trying to assess that during an interview process, because I say a fixed mindset won't last very long with us, because we're constantly growing and we need people to grow with us. And if they're comfortable with where they are, then it's just not going to work. I want people who are willing to be uncomfortable and being challenged to do things that maybe are beyond where they are at this moment, but they're willing to roll up their sleeves and learn and grow. And again, it's fine to make mistakes, learn from mistakes, don't repeat them. I think showing that you are a trustworthy, reliable person to more senior people in the organization, that you're willing to volunteer for tasks that might not be exactly in your area of responsibility, that makes people stand out. The program that we have here, just as an example, that's going on. I have a graduation ceremony for FCC University. We've taken our best managers, because I'm a big believer. People join companies and they quit bosses. You have a bad boss, I don't care how much you believe in the company, eventually you're going to want to leave. And so we need to train our key people to be better managers. And that is our way of investing in this notion of developing champions from within. And you want to show that you're someone who's worthy of people investing and developing as champions. We also talk about aligned ambition. We're an ambitious club. We want people to grow with us. At a certain point, if you get a great opportunity to go somewhere else, you don't have to hide that. We're going to celebrate you. You did such good work for us, helping us grow, that you've earned yourself another opportunity. And we are thrilled for your success. But the other part of aligned ambition is we're growing. If you had a fixed mindset and you weren't able to grow with us, and now we've outpaced you, we're going to return you to the marketplace, and you know that someone else, some other opportunity is going to come along. And we try to do that very transparently. It's always about pushing ourselves with that growth mindset around an ambitious agenda for the club and for the individuals, because I want the individuals to have that same level of ambition with that growth mindset. And that starts at the very beginning when we're hiring you, and then all the way through, whether it stays with us or that launches an opportunity outside. But I want people who are hungry like that. And so for all the students, I would say, to the extent that feels authentic to you and you find ways to exhibit that, I think that'll set you up for great success.
Absolutely great advice. And as I was telling the students right before you got on the Zoom, Jeff was part of our bid, if you will, this past week, going out to Sundance Film Festival. It isn't anything that he had to do, but again, because of his civic background and his civic leadership, we were thrilled to have him with us. Jeff, thank you so much for being there with us at Sundance. I hope you had a good time out there. Hope you enjoyed it.
It was awesome.
Yeah, it was a good time. And so
I had a great time. My wife and I had a great time.
Good. And so now we wait. For a couple of months. So, Jeff, thank you so much for your time in the class. For the students, thank you for being here with us. We will put this on probably I'll put it on my YouTube, and then I'll just leave you the link if you want to look at it again. Jeff, if any of the students want to follow up with you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
My email's jeff@fccincinnati.com.
All right.
jeff@fccincinnati.com. And let me say, listen, I love Notre Dame. I'm a Catholic from Cincinnati. Been to many games. I wish I could have gone there. But I'm thrilled for all of you. It's an important institution in this country in terms of servant leadership and moral leadership, and certainly encourage you and wish you all the best.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for your time. Thank you all, and we will see you on Monday in class. Jeff, thanks so much. Good luck this season at FC.
Thanks, Betsy.
Thank you.